There is probably very little that I could say about Grand Theft Auto Vice City that hasn't already been said. This game, along with 3 and San Andreas, are considered some of the landmark titles in open world video games, and it is a defining title of its time period. There are very few open world games even today whose conventions and paradigms cannot be traced in at least some way back to these old GTA games. Now, for most of my life, I kept hearing that this was a legendary game, possibly one of the greatest games ever made, and possibly the best GTA game. But after talking about it for more than a minute, it also becomes clear that a lot of the people saying that were people who played it back when it first came out, which in many instances would mean they played it when they were little. This doesn't necessarily mean that these people are all nostalgia blind or anything like that, but at the very least, I don't think it's unfair of me to say that perhaps many of the standards for how video games are designed and how they work have changed drastically in the almost 2 decades since this game first came out. And that's where I come in. You see, I don't have a shred of nostalgia connection to Vice City at all, because I unfortunately did not grow up with Vice City, because my parents suffered from a rare psychiatric condition known in the medical world as actually listening to the ESRB. They did not want 5-year-old Phantom Bino killing women and blowing up cars and stealing polygonal cocaine, which means I didn't get to play it until very recently when I finally did a full playthrough, start to finish. And with the rumors of a remastered collection of those 3 games on the horizon, I think now is as good a time as any to talk about it. That's what this video is. It's a 100% purebred, nostalgia-free, rose-tinted glasses-free, gluten-free, sulfate-free review of an old-ass game from almost 20 years ago. So sit back and kick your feet up, because this is gonna be one bumpy-ass ride. Now, Vice City has always been a big deal. Even though I never got to play the game back when it was popular and relevant, I knew about it. Back in those days, if you were a little baby boy, games like Grand Theft Auto were kinda like mythical artifacts that you only ever heard about in storybooks and songs, or your older half-brother whose dad let them play whatever they wanted. This was still around the beginning of the digital information age, before every single person had constant internet access, so it's not like today where everyone knows about every single thing the second it happens. Like, fucking YouTube didn't even exist yet. This was a magical time because the entire gaming world was a lot more mysterious, and a lot of the time the only way you would have heard about this stuff would be from word of mouth, or older brother, or the shitty glue sniffer in math class who kept lying out his ass about how his uncle works for Nintendo and how he has a Wii 2 XD and that the plastic is even more delicious than all that tasty yummy glue. But if you were lucky, you might have had a subscription to a video game magazine like Game Informer or something like that, and if you were extra lucky, you could kinda count on your parents not being fully in the loop and getting you the game, at which point you would be exposed to all the horrors of polygonal nudity and drugs and raspberry jam until they caught you and then drove all the way to Washington to tell Congress to ban it, at which point a brave man named Jack Thompson would lead the fight against the series and then lose every time because, you know, free speech, and then get disbarred by the Supreme Court of Florida for being a dumbass. But if you were unlucky, your parents wouldn't have let you play it in the first place, and that, unfortunately, was my situation. It wasn't until now that I've finally gotten to play it through to the credits. Now, playing games a long time after they come out, no matter how good they are, has a way of launching a lot of their issues to the forefront. Even games that do manage to stand the test of time in many respects often show their age in many others, and Vice City, surprise, surprise, motherfucker, is no exception. Now let's discuss the most obvious thing to start off with. The first thing you notice when firing up Vice City. The presentation. Because of the way technology evolves, the grand majority of video games will look like dog shit after 5 or 6 years because the new innovations quickly make them obsolete. If we're talking about a cartoonish game like Mario, which leans way more heavily on stylistic choices than extremely high polygon counts and whatnot, those games tend to look fine with age. Nowhere is this more apparent when observing human figures. I mean, yeah, Mario has like 7 polygons in Mario 64, but he was never supposed to look hyper-realistic, so it doesn't really matter. Compare this to MGS1, where everyone was supposed to look real, but now they look like some kind of blocky mannequin with an 8x8 texture of a face duct taped onto them. One of these games is more technically impressive, but the other game is just nicer to look at. Concerning GTA, I remember when GTA 4 looked like real life, but look at it now, looks like ass, right? Vice City, being an older game, naturally has even more hilariously bad-looking people, but remember, this game's pretty much 20 years old, so what could you reasonably expect, right? But Vice City actually gets away with a lot of that because the world of Vice City is friggin' magical. There is something so spectacularly enchanting about it that I can't quite put my finger on. The warm glow of the sun, the bright sandy beaches, the fleshed-out locations, the movie set where Alfred Hitchcock faked the moon landing, it's an incredibly complete and cohesive world, and that's what Rockstar does. They make these maps that are just fucking bonkers and so mind-bendingly massive in detail, but the thing about Vice City, especially compared to Rockstar's later games, is that it really isn't a massive place. Maybe it was, you know, back in 2002, but not really anymore, and to be honest, that's not really a criticism, because in my experience, that wasn't really a bad thing. From a gameplay perspective, there is so much less wasted space. I feel like, you know, GTA 5 and Red Dead 2, the maps are like ginormous and beautiful, but only a handful of select pieces of it are utilized in a meaningful way, while the grand majority of it is just eye candy and showing off how fancy and pretty the new graphics engine is, whereas Vice City, by comparison, is way more like a playground that feels like it actually wants you to play in it. It's this bizarre, fascinating liminal space where it almost looks like a real location, but is also clearly designed as a big funky video game level that you're just supposed to mess around in and have fun in, and I think that's why it's easier to suspend disbelief with the funky PS2 era character models, because the world feels cartoonish and silly in a good way, even though they were probably trying to create a real place, which is why it's nicer to look at than, again, GTA 4, which, as I said, looked phenomenal when it first came out. That game was going for a gritty, realistic look, but because the technology aged so quickly as it tends to do, it just looks like total penis now. They also really nailed the soundtrack in Vice City. Anybody who's played this game will tell you that. I don't even want to know how much money they spent licensing all this authentic, real 80s music that you would have heard all the time on the radio back then. I'm not gonna play it here because of Content ID, but trust me, it's there. And you got all these radio shows run by insane people who are all probably snorting an entire bag of cocaine per minute because it's 1985.
The problem with Alaska is that people don't get naked.
The world is just begging for the player to go driving around and exploring. It's always got something for you, like area-specific rampage missions where you just shoot a billion nondescript rival gangsters with whatever weapon they decide to give you. You got these collectibles called hidden packages scattered throughout the world. When I found the first 2 or 3 of these things, that really got the ball rolling, and I would just spend like tens of minutes at a time looking all over the map for these things. Unlike something like GTA 5, where hidden collectibles are always in some incredibly specific dumbass place that you probably wouldn't even find without some kind of hint, Vice City is a little more reasonable about it. If you see a place that's a little more distinctive than the rest of them, there's probably something there. And during my travels, I accidentally stumbled upon a helicopter and I just had this moment of, oh, fucking A. The amount of time I spent free roaming, just searching up and down the map with this helicopter is crazy. I literally filled up my external hard drive with footage of this game because I spent so much time just walking the earth and finding random stuff on my own because the game just makes it so fun to do that. In case you've never played a GTA game, the core gameplay revolves around committing various crimes for various people to get various money and advance various plot points so you can buy various mansions and various guns to allow you to steal various cars to run over various presumably innocent civilians, while escaping various police officers and robbing 17 convenience stores. Basically, you fire up the game and you're free to do whatever the hell you want until you go to a mission where you get a cutscene and a briefing, at which point you go commit some crimes and get your money. On the surface, the main campaign's gameplay may seem relatively shallow, and yeah, it kind of is. There's a lot of repetitive driving and shooting, but what's cool about Vice City is that it's sometimes not as scripted as Rockstar's newer titles, which means there are occasional moments where you can use your head and play smarter instead of harder. It never reaches like Breath of the Phantom Pain levels of freedom, but in my experience it grants the player just a tiny bit more agency than Rockstar's newer titles, and that's pretty cool because this is still an open open world game about a psychotic criminal who disobeys all the rules. In my GTA 5 video, I referenced a mission in this game where you have to kill a guy who's playing golf. It sounds fair enough, but the only problem is when you enter the golf course, they confiscate all your weapons, so you can only be armed with a golf club. That wouldn't be so bad, except when you get anywhere near the target, he hops into a golf cart and drives away faster than a fucking F-Zero racer, and after trying to chase him down a bunch, I just kept messing it up, and after getting really sick of this guy's shit, I decided to actually just destroy all the golf carts before approaching it. And then once I triggered the chase, he had no golf cart to run to, so he was just running around on foot, which made him very easy to catch, and I felt like a genius. It is still scripted to some extent, mostly to service the game's story, but those moments like that one where you can be smart, you know, they're just really nice. The more I play this game, the more apparent the gradual shift in Rockstar's game design becomes to me. Whereas their newer titles are always trying to go for some form of hyper-realism with extremely detailed and realistic animations and naturalistic locations, Vice City by comparison feels much more video gamey. You have these shiny pickups which give you health and power-ups, you can collect these badges that lower your wanted level, the world has all these very obvious ramps and shit. The story, even though it has some serious moments, is a lot more goofy and is very clearly more of a riff on those famous crime dramas like Scarface and Miami Vice City. Oh, that's why they called it that. It's not going for insane, crazy drama like GTA 4 or 5 or Red Dead. There's a lot of jokes and cliches, and it fully embraces them, and that's what this game is. It's just funny, and that meshes well with the gameplay because the gameplay can be pretty funny too. This is the kind of game where if you were a kid playing it when it first came out, you could spend your whole summer playing through this game and finding everything, and knowing that I never got to experience that in my childhood makes me a little bit sad. There is a great wealth of content to be found in here. I remember after I reached the credits, I'd been playing for a good while and I thought I'd been relatively thorough, getting as many of the things as I possibly could and doing all the challenges, and then I went into the stats menu and found that I only had 57% of the game complete. That was nuts. I still had half a game left. Again, there are bigger games out there, but there's more than enough in here to satisfy your hunger, especially now that it only costs $10 on Steam. You are getting a lot out of it for that kind of money. Vice City has this great sense of progression where the missions get bigger and bigger each time. You start getting more money from them, and as you keep going, you can buy up properties and they make money, and it starts accumulating, and you're just building your empire up to this massive scale. They all have these little mission strands you gotta do. You can deliver ice cream and then get a wanted level because it's actually drugs, like Jolly Ranchers. Taxi driving missions where you have to kill rival taxi drivers so they don't steal your business. You can buy all these safe houses and properties, and then you realize, hey, these properties come with an infinitely respawning supply of guns and weapons. Now I don't even have to waste money at the fucking gun store anymore. You start out feeling like some kind of bottom bitch, but by the end of the game, you can rule this city, Spider-Man. And it's a great feeling. You actually feel like you climbed the ladder to success escalator style, while you leave your competition respirator style. That's Biggie. I often thought about the story of Vice City as not being super important, but I think that's mostly just because of how far Rockstar has come with narrative-driven games since then. Compared to all the character building and super dramatic moments of those later games, Vice City, at least on the surface, seems to be way more in the vicinity of, hey, Tommy Vassetti, it's me, Tony Spinoli. I was talking to Mickey Macaroni and he says Freddie Fettuccine's gotta go, so you and Vinny Vermicelli gotta take this rocket launcher and turn him into spaghetti sauce, and then Tommy's all like, alright, whatever, I'll do it, I'm Ray Liotta, Rockstar didn't pay me enough money apparently. Then you kill Freddie Fettuccine and it's all like, hey Tommy, good job, here's your money. But then fucking Peter Pepperoni's all like, Tommy, you betrayed me, and Tommy's like, no I didn't, eat lead, you fucking dick nuts. And while that's kind of partially true, that's really not such a bad thing. The characters are all distinct and memorable, and they're funny, and the more goofy nature of the dialogue perfectly suits the kind of game this is. It's not going for deep, thoughtful character studies. It's a story about gangsters fucking shit up. Now, everything I just said sounds really tight and rad and cool and stuff, but too bad the game sucks ass. Yeah, now it's time to get serious. It's time to talk about how janky this game is. That's what we're here for. I should point out that I am primarily a retro gamer. I have played a ton of older games and I continue to play them because I find them interesting, but also in some respects there are things about them that I kind of prefer over newer games. At the same time though, I have become increasingly aware of and sensitive to the things that old games have that make them terrible. I was actually talking to a friend the other day and he basically said that every game made before the year 2004 is, at least in some respect, a busted up piece of trash, and unfortunately I kinda had to agree with him. And I agreed with him fully aware that that includes 90% of my favorite games. And it's not the devs' fault really, the art of game design is constantly evolving based on ongoing evaluations of what works and what doesn't, and the further back you go, the less data they had to work with, so they make a lot more mistakes that would probably be considered stupid today. In my experience though, it's rarely a fundamental broad strokes game design issue that hurts a lot of these games, so much as an overabundance of disparate, shitty little parts that slowly accumulate until it gives you an aneurysm. Things like abrupt, sharp difficulty spikes, or challenges that don't really work within the rest of the game's context, or small sections of gameplay that for whatever reason just don't seem intuitive or don't function the way maybe they should, even down to little things like text boxes that move at 2 millimeters per frickin' hour, or frustrating AI that doesn't do what you need or expect it to, and I found that Vice City touched on a few of these issues. Probably the biggest beef I have with this game can be found in those various moments where the game is disproportionately punishing for the dumbest, smallest shit. If we're talking big picture here, Vice City is fundamentally a pretty easy game, right? You drive and you walk and you shoot. It doesn't get any simpler than that, but it's in those disparate moments where making a small mistake can get you fucking annihilated that Vice City is at its worst. Sometimes the aiming is awkward and the bullets often don't really go where you expect them to. There's this gun runner mission where they keep blowing up your car and you have to step out and run around, and if you step anywhere in front of their car for like a split second, they'll knock you over and you'll go from full health and armor to death in like 3 seconds. That happened to me like 5 times. This mission was fucking annoying. This game is at its worst when it piles a shitload of enemies on you at once because the controls are not always as responsive and as immediate as you need them to be, and most of your guns can't be fired while you're moving, so you have to stop in place while firing them and then fucking study the frame data so you know how early you can move or swap weapons after you stop firing the gun. Cars will immediately catch fire if they capsize. Now this is a story all about how my car got flipped, turned upside down, and then it caught fire and I don't know why, then it blew up. Fuck you, Rockstar. I had this one mission where it was supposed to play a cutscene of the boat approaching the dock so I could start shooting up the place, but it didn't play no matter what I did, even after killing literally every single person in sight, so I had to jump off the boat and drown myself because... Oh right, did I mention you can't swim in this game? Yeah, apparently Tommy has lead weights in his shoes, so the second he touches waist-high water, he just ceases to exist. Then I spawn back at the hospital, and now I have to get all my guns back and... Oh right, did I mention that whenever you die, you lose all your fucking guns and have to get them all back? You gotta either buy them all again or go to one of your safe houses. I love how they put a taxi in front of the hospital to bring you back to the mission, but you'll be unarmed, so most of the time it's useless. It's not even a money issue. It's not hard to get money in this game, so you can usually afford to get your guns back, or again, the safe houses have free guns, but since it takes no skill or anything like that, it just ends up being another way of eating your time. It's a wasteful, artificial way of lengthening the game. And that's another thing. A lot of missions, on top of being subject to general early 2000s video game jank, are also very drawn out and inflated by unavoidable non-gameplay like driving between the missions and unskippable cutscenes and shit. And this continues to be an issue with Rockstar's games to this day. One of the worst examples of this is the bank job, where first you gotta grab the boys, then you gotta drive to the bank, then watch an unskippable cutscene of them getting out of the car and opening the hatch, walk over to the bank, watch another unskippable cutscene of them putting on Jason masks, enter the bank, watch another unskippable cutscene, go upstairs to the safe, find out you need the manager to open it, go back down, grab the manager, do a mini escort mission where you bring him back up, go back downstairs, watch another unskippable cutscene of the SWAT team yelling at you, then shoot out, then make a getaway. Oh, and by the way, if you get killed during the shootout, you're gonna have to do all that shit all over again. But of course not before getting all your fucking guns back. There was this dumbass mission where I had to drive a motorcycle along rooftops in a very roundabout way to get to the top of a specific building to turn on a giant porn ad, which was a goddamn nightmare because if you slightly miscalculate a ramp jump, you go flying off the building and have to start all over again, or if you do it too fast or too slow, you'll either miss or fly off the other end of the building, and your only saving grace is these ladders here and there that unlock as you go. And also there's a fucking time limit, so if you take too long you have to do it again. I almost wonder if I could have just stolen a helicopter and flown on top of the roof instead. This dumbass street race mission almost made me drink Windex. This is a textbook case of fuck you idiot game design, which is to say that it's a mission where you're racing against the single most immaculate driver in the entire world, which means the only winning move is to just make zero mistakes, while also being really fast, and if you go too slow or bump into just one thing, you'll never see him again. But if there's one thing in Vice City that manages every time without fail to just knock the wind out of any and all enjoyment I had with this game, it's the boats. Any mission in this game that involves you driving a boat is like a deep web nightmare horror video. Driving boats in a video game is always terrible because they keep trying to simulate the physics of wind and waves, so just fundamentally there's so much crap that's not in your control. And in order to go where you actually want to go, you have to be precise and careful and take it slowly, except when you're not allowed to do that because, surprise surprise, there's a time limit, so you have to drive over these ramps to get the cocaine, except if you go at a slightly wrong angle or too fast, you'll miss the collectible and have to loop all the way back around to get it. Oh wait, I spent too much time doing that. Now I ran out the clock and I failed the mission. Okay, let's try it again. Oops, I missed another one because I wasn't precise or careful enough. Guess I'll die now because there's no time left. You know what? Fuck this game for that, you know? This is some chicken shit ass bullshit. This is worse than the train mission. Like, easily. And before you say I'm bad at the game, I did eventually beat this mission on my 6th try, just like I did with all those other missions. So I damn well earned my right to say it, especially when the game immediately followed that up by gay baby jailing me into a post afterwards. When this happened, I almost had a heart attack because I hadn't gotten to save my progress yet, so I could have just lost it all. Fortunately, I eventually broke out of it and saved like 50 times immediately, but the mere possibility that the game could have screwed me like that traumatized me more than any video game I've ever played before. The only thing that rivals the boats are any mission with RC vehicles. This just makes me want to redacted in Minecraft. Now, GTA 5 with its easy-ass linear missions that hold your hand and give you a checkpoint every 3 seconds might not exactly be good, but this is just straight up fucking bad. And it kinda tears me apart a little bit because I like that the game is a lot of the time more challenging than Rockstar's newer games in an honest to god real way. But when it feels illegitimately harder, it just makes me angry, and the worst part is that I suspect this is why Rockstar's games slowly got more and more easy and handholdy in later years. Instead of just working out the kinks and making a tighter and more highly polished game as they went on, which could have given them the freedom to reintroduce more legitimate difficulty, they just have all their games on bitch mode now. Like, imagine the more challenging missions of Vice City, but with the somewhat more polished shooting and cover and driving mechanics of the newer titles. That'd be a friggin' wet dream. Instead, they polished the game while simultaneously making it baby mode, and that's frustrating to me, but enough about GTA 5, that's not what this video is about. Eventually it got to the point where every time I started a new mission, I would just be filled with this nervous dread. I didn't know what frustrating, stupid shit they were going to pull on me next, but I just knew that it was happening one way or another. It was simply a matter of when. As far as jank is concerned, you can kinda get used to that after a while, but the other stuff just makes me want to die. And of course, not every single mission is like that, but enough of them are that I can't really ignore it. But let's reel it back in here for a second. Everything I just said may well be true, but remember, this is a contemporary gamer's perspective, right? Like I said 7 years ago, the standards are just different now, and all those things aside, the game is still pretty lit. Vice City is a highly imperfect and often rough game from the standpoint of gameplay, which certainly shows its age very often, and I suppose I knew that going in. However, if you have the patience to get used to the jank and to put up with all the unskippable crap and drive the shitty boat and the shitty RC helicopter and the shitty RC plane and the slightly 3mm off gun crosshairs. Basically, if you can have a little patience for this game's oldie bullshit, you will experience a really great classic, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to see why it has endured so long. I have no nostalgic connection to this game, and I have a low tolerance for bullshit, as you probably figured out by now, but even I was able to find enjoyment in it. The world, the liberty, the progression, the Tommy, it's all there. I definitely had most of my fun just driving around the open world and being the best Tommy Vercetti I could possibly be, and that's the whole point. Rockstar games are about exploring the world and soaking everything in, and that was where the game was at its best for me, and it's so damn impressive to me when a game this crusty in that many respects manages to redeem itself like that. So, yeah, it's a pretty good game. Hey cousins, I just want to take this moment to thank you for watching this video. If you like hearing me crap on GTA games, I made a big ass video on GTA 5 like 4 months ago. It's got all kinds of funny stuff in it. It has me ragdolling through a store window a billion times. It's got Franklin's super round forehead. It's got some Trevor Phillips, so yeah, it's a pretty fun video, I guess. Also, feel free to check out my socials over here. I'm still spending way too much time on Twitter, so if you want to recommend me some stuff, the link to that'll be in the description, and you can do it there. But otherwise, I guess I'll see you again sometime next week, where I'm going to talk about the console wars or something. That's going to be a fun video.